Abraham and his nephew Lot had traveled together for many years, from the land of Ur to the wilderness of Canaan, following the calling of God. They had endured famine, journeyed through Egypt, and returned to the land with abundant wealth. Their herds had grown large, and both men had prospered. God had richly blessed them, and their tents dotted the landscape from Bethel to Ai. But as their possessions increased, so did the pressure upon the land. There simply wasn't enough room to support both Abraham's and Lot's flocks, herds, and servants. Pasture land became scarce, and water sources were increasingly strained. Tensions rose between their herdsmen, who began to quarrel over resources. Arguments flared in the heat of the day, and conflict brewed within the camp. Abraham, a man of peace and maturity, recognized the danger of division. He understood that strife could quickly destroy what God had built. So, he took the initiative and called Lot to a quiet place, away from the disputes and noise. With wisdom and humility, Abraham spoke. "Let there be no conflict between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine. We are family. Is not the whole land before us? Let us separate, that we may live in peace." Abraham then offered Lot the first choice of land. "If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left." Though Abraham was the elder, and God had promised him the land, he laid aside his rights for the sake of harmony. It was an act of incredible grace and faith, a leader who trusted not in land, but in the promise of God. Lot lifted his eyes and scanned the horizon. He saw the Jordan Valley, lush and green, a fertile paradise well watered like the Garden of Eden. The valley promised ease, prosperity, and comfort. Near the valley were the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, known even then for their wickedness. But Lot was enticed by what he saw. He chose the Jordan Valley for himself and pitched his tents near Sodom, eager to enjoy the apparent abundance of the land. Abraham watched Lot depart without complaint. Though his nephew chose what seemed to be the better portion, Abraham did not waver. His confidence was not in appearances but in God's covenant. As Lot faded into the horizon, Abraham remained in Canaan, surrounded by less fertile terrain but filled with peace. Then God spoke to Abraham, reaffirming his divine promise. "Lift your eyes and look from the place where you are north, south, east, and west. All the land you see, I will give to you and your descendants forever." God promised not only land, but a legacy. "I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, too numerous to count." This blessing came not by force, but through Abraham's faith and humility. Abraham responded, not with pride, but with worship. He moved his tents and settled by the great trees of Mamre, near Hebron. There he built an altar to the Lord, a sacred place to honor the one who had called and sustained him. The altar stood as a symbol of his faith, a monument, not of conquest, but of trust. Meanwhile, Lot made his home near Sodom. The valley was rich, but the culture corrupt. Lot had chosen, based on sight, not spirit, and would one day suffer the consequences of settling so close to wickedness. But for now, he enjoyed prosperity, unaware of the spiritual cost. The decision to separate shaped the future in profound ways. Abraham's choice of peace over possession allowed God to move freely through him. He had chosen the harder path, staying in the rugged land of Canaan, yet it was the path of promise. Abraham would walk the land and see with his own eyes what God would one day give to his descendants. His descendants would become kings, prophets, warriors, and eventually, the lineage of the Messiah. From that quiet decision to avoid conflict, a nation would rise. Abraham had not sought control or dominion, he had sought peace, and that peace unlocked the plan of God. Lot, though righteous in heart, would find himself increasingly entangled in the culture of Sodom. The fertile plains he chose would one day be swallowed in fire. His story would continue in pain and divine rescue, while Abraham's journey would rise in covenant and blessing. The story reminds us that not all that glitters is gold. Lot saw green fields and worldly gain, but missed the warning signs of spiritual danger. Abraham saw something greater: God's faithfulness. He didn't need the best land. He needed only God's direction. Their separation wasn't just physical, it represented two different ways of walking through life. One man walked by sight, the other by faith. One chose comfort, the other chose calling, and their choices echoed through generations. Abraham's willingness to let go and trust God reveals a lesson in leadership that is timeless. He avoided conflict not by asserting his rights, but by laying them down. His peacemaking spirit brought clarity and direction, and in the end, he gained far more than land. He gained eternal promise. God's words to Abraham still resonate. "All the land you see, I will give to you forever." It was not just about geography, but about destiny. Abraham would become the father of many nations, not because he fought for power, but because he lived by faith. The altar at Mamre stood as a testimony of that faith. In a land of rocky soil and spiritual battles, Abraham chose to worship. He believed in a promise he could not yet see, and through that belief, he secured a future he could scarcely imagine. Lot's choice also teaches a lesson. The pursuit of easy prosperity can bring unexpected consequences. Though Lot did not intend to embrace wickedness, his closeness to Sodom slowly pulled him into a world that opposed God. He would face trials, heartbreak, and rescue, but at a great cost. The decision between Abraham and Lot is more than a family dispute. It's a parable of vision. Abraham lifted his eyes in faith. Lot lifted his eyes in desire. One chose divine promise, the other, worldly advantage. This story challenges us to consider how we choose. Do we grasp at comfort and short-term gain, or do we trust God's timing, even if the road looks rough? Do we make peace when we could demand our way? Do we worship when others would worry? Abraham's story shows that surrender isn't weakness, it's strength. It takes courage to release control and trust that God will honor His word. Abraham didn't need the greenest land. He had the greatest God. Lot's departure wasn't a loss, it was a divine setup. By letting go of Lot, Abraham made space for God to speak again. Sometimes, separation brings revelation, and sometimes, letting go of the familiar makes room for the eternal. As the sun set over Canaan and the stars filled the sky, Abraham stood on land that would one day belong to a countless nation, dust and stars. God had said such would be the number of His children. From that quiet act of peace came a story still unfolding today. And it all began with one man saying to another, "Let there be no strife between us, for we are family."